Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Now that it's July, it's time to start making some Christmas in July videos. Paper Rose recently released some fun Christmas wintry collections. So here are 3 of them. We have Oh So Sweet Christmas, Winter Gathering, and Winter Blooms. They also released 3 more coordinating collections. So we have Winter Dots and Stripes, Winter Plaid, and Winter Basics. And these colors coordinate perfectly with those 3 collections. So this is really fun. You can stretch your 6x6 papers. For my video today, I'm starting off with Winter Blooms. I love this collection. It is absolutely gorgeous. And I love that it has patriotic colors. So there are a couple sheets of cut-aparts. There's some sentiments and also some images. Their paper packs include 18 double-sided pattern papers, and there's 3 each of 12 designs. So I'm just flipping through these so you can see all the beautiful patterns. Now, other than the 1 sheet of cut-aparts that has the sentiments, this collection really isn't Christmas or winter, so it could be used for any card theme. But I will be using it for Christmas and winter cards since I love those cut-aparts. So let's go ahead and get started with card design number 1. I'm using one of the sheets that has this beautiful floral design. This sheet of pattern paper had that same floral design on both sides, so I just cut the sheet in half. I did trim it down just a little bit more. I think it's about 2.5 inches. Then I'm adding a strip of this gingham paper. This is from the Winter Basics collection. Layering everything on some blue cardstock. Then to cover up that gap from those 2 pattern papers, I'm adding this narrow strip, and this is the back side of the gingham paper. And I have it just a little bit wider than the other 2 pattern papers. And all of my cards in this video are American Standard A2 size, so 5.5 inches by 4.25 inches. For the sentiment, I'm adding the words Winter Wishes. This is a great die set since it has the words and also that outline. So for the outline, I use some white shimmer cardstock. Then I use some red cardstock for the words. Use my reverse tweezers to hold those pieces while I glue everything in place. And for the dots to the eye, I'm using an embellishment wand to pick them up since they are fairly small. Now I'll bring in a few of the cut-aparts, and I've already gone ahead and fussy cut these out using a pair of scissors. I did 2 of the sheets, so there's a total of 3. I decided to keep that 3rd one for the back side of the paper. I'll add a few of the branches behind the word winter. I have 1 more tiny little branch I'm trying to tuck in between those others. Glue those in place. Now before adhering this to the card, I am adding a scrap piece of cardstock behind the word wishes. That way when I glue it down, it's all at the same level and it's not going to have a little dip where it goes off of that middle strip. Then to finish off the card, I'm using some Nuvo Crystal Drops. This is the Morning Dew color. It's clear, so it's just going to add a tiny bit of shine. I'm just adding little tiny drops around those flowers and also in the center of those cream colored flowers. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. That pattern paper is so beautiful. I didn't think the card needed a lot of extra. Now moving on to card design number 2, I'm using a card sketch from OWH. This is number 240. And if you are interested in any of the sketches I show in this video, I do have all of that information on my coordinating blog post. The link is provided in the description box below, or you can simply head over to KristieMarcotte.com. For the background, I have this lovely blue pattern paper that looks like snowfall. I'm adding this small rectangle piece with all the little branches, layering everything on some blue cardstock. And then for that thin strip at the bottom, I use this blue, kind of a distressed watercolor looking paper. Even when I use card sketches, I don't always follow those measurements exactly. For all of my layers, I decided to add an additional 1/8 of an inch instead of the 1/4 of an inch that's indicated on the sketch. Now instead of that horizontal little sentiment box, I'm using one of the vertical cut-aparts. I love this sentiment, Hello Winter, time to get cozy. And I'll layer that on the same blue cardstock. I did add some scrap cardstock on the left side where it goes off of that pattern paper with the branches. Then for a few finishing touches, I'm adding a couple of these lovely snowflakes from Paper Rose. I cut them out from some white glitter cardstock. Add just a little bit of glue in the center and adhere them in the lower right-hand corner. Then I'll also use some of Paper Rose's shaker mix. This is the clear crystal mix. It's one of my favorites. I'll put 2 of them in the upper left-hand corner. I'll put 1 in the center of each of the snowflakes and then just 1 more in that lower right-hand corner. And I'm using my embellishment wand to help pick those up since there isn't adhesive on the back. The crystal mix includes 4 different sizes, although the smallest size is teeny tiny. Sometimes it's hard to pick up, or at least to flip over. They like to be upside down when I dump them in my little tray. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this sketch. For the other card, I just used a different cut apart. Now moving on to card design number 3. I have this beautiful red pattern paper. I used Paper Rose's pierced rectangle die to cut that out, so it has that fun little pierced detail along the outside. For the background, I'm using one of the winter basics. This is the red gingham. I put some ATG tape on the back side of this piece and also some liquid adhesive along that very outside edge just to make sure it laid flat on the card. And then I'll layer this piece on some red cardstock. Most of my cards in this video are fairly simple since I really focused on the beautiful pattern paper. I'm not using any stamp sets at all, although I do use several different dies. So I'll put my card front onto a card base, and I'm adding this beautiful floral arrangement, one of the cut aparts, and then I also have one of the sentiment cut aparts. If winter has the courage to turn into spring, who says you can't bloom just the same? I love that positive sentiment. So I layered it on that same red cardstock, glued it down in the upper left-hand corner. I did add some thin foam dimension behind the floral image and then adhered it in that lower right-hand corner. Then for a few finishing touches, I'm adding the little bow from the die set Presents. I cut it out from some Mir specialty cardstock that matches that red almost perfectly. I'll just adhere it underneath the sentiment. Then I'll finish off the card with a few more of the clear crystals. I do use this mix quite a bit throughout this video. I'll add 2 in the lower right hand corner, 2 in the upper left hand corner, and 1 above that floral arrangement. And I think as long as you don't use the largest crystal, you could still easily mail this card without paying any additional postage, at least here in the US. So there's my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. I just have a different sentiment cut apart for the other card. For card design number 4, I have another beautiful floral pattern paper. I mean, they all really are beautiful. So for this one, I just trimmed it down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. Didn't want to lose a lot of this gorgeous pattern. So I layered it on some blue cardstock. I'm adding one of the sentiment cut aparts, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Now the background on that cut apart is fairly busy with the little floral and leaf design, and if I placed it directly on that pattern paper, it would really get lost. So I decided to layer it twice. First on some blue cardstock and then on some white glitter cardstock. Now you're gonna see this falls apart on me. I did not let that glue dry long enough onto that glitter cardstock, so I ended up dropping that whole piece glue side down right onto the top of my card. Now fortunately, it really didn't show a whole lot and I was able to sort of wipe it away. For a few finishing touches, I'm adding a small banner in the upper right-hand corner, and this isn't a die, I just cut it myself. I'll also bring out those clear crystals, put 2 of them in the upper right-hand corner, 2 in the lower left-hand corner, and then 1 to the right of that sentiment. I like to use an odd number of embellishments. It just seems to balance out the card a little nicer. So there's my finished card, and I did make 2, just have a different sentiment for the other card, which I love, Do What Makes You Feel Sparkly Inside. For card design number 5, the background's fairly similar to the previous design that has all those lovely florals, but But on this paper, there's also a little bird just peeking out from those branches. And then it also has this little box to the left. So I trimmed this down to 5 3/8 of an inch by 4 1/8 of an inch. I didn't want to lose a lot of that pattern. Layered it on some blue cardstock. Then I'm adding one of the larger cut-aparts with the floral. I popped it up with some thin foam squares. And I have a couple more little branches that I'm going to tuck in there as well. So just to add a little extra dimension to this card. For the sentiment, I'm bringing in the Winter Wishes die set again. Cut it out from that same blue cardstock I used for the background. This little box is so fun. You could add a sentiment, or you could add another image in there. I thought the sentiment worked out well. And I do have part of the W from the word wishes tucked behind one of the branches. Then I'll add the little dot to both of the eyes. And I think I had to cut out the little dot twice since I lost one of them somewhere in my craft room. I'm sure it's on the floor somewhere. Also going to add 2 little banners in the upper right-hand corner. I have one in the red cardstock and one in blue, and the blue is just a little bit shorter than the red. I'll adhere the red banner down first and then attach the blue on top and offset it slightly. Try to make sure to get it nice and straight. Then I'll also bring in the clear crystals, put 2 of them in the upper right hand corner on top of the banners. And I'm trying to add that teeny tiny little crystal and it kept flipping upside down on me. And I'll add 2 crystals in the lower left-hand corner and 1 above that little floral arrangement, fairly close to the little bird that's peeking out. So there's my finished card, and I was only able to make 1 since I only had 1 sheet of this pattern paper left. For card design number 6, I have this beautiful blue pattern paper for the background. And using some of that cut-off strip of that background paper, I used a stitched strip die, added some double-sided tape to the back, and adhered it to the lower portion of the card. So it's that same pattern, it just has that fun stitch detail. So just for a little extra interest on the card. I'll layer the background piece on some blue cardstock, adhere my card front onto a card base. And for this card, I will have that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. I used the Winter Dots and Stripes collection. So I have this red polka dot paper and cut out a scalloped oval frame. I'm going to put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it to my card. And I did put an acrylic block on top just for some extra weight so that glue would adhere in place. I have another beautiful floral image, and there's a little bird tucked in there behind that lower red flower. Popped it up using some thin foam squares and just adhered it to the lower corner on the right. For this sentiment, I'm using one of Paper Rose's Christmas sentiment cut-aparts. So this is Peace on Earth. I cut the left side at an angle, and before adhering it to the card, I will add some thin foam squares underneath where it goes off of that little floral cut-apart, just to keep them at the same level. I'll put a little bit of liquid adhesive where it'll attach to that floral cut apart. And to finish off the card, bringing in those crystals again, put 2 in the upper left-hand corner, 2 in the lower right-hand corner underneath the floral image, and 1 above the sentiment. I love the look of that scallop oval in the red and white polka dot paper against that blue background. It adds some gorgeous contrast. So there is my finished card, and I was able to make 2 using this design. I just used a different sentiment cut apart on the other card. Now moving on to card design number 7. I'll be using a card sketch again. This is from MFT, it's number 488. For the background of the card, I'm using some of the Winter Plaid collection. It's this beautiful plaid with a very dark green. There's some lighter green strips and also some red in there. For the lower portion, I used a scrap of that blue little snowfall paper, and I cut it at an angle. Layering everything on some dark green cardstock, and using that same dark green cardstock, I also have this stitch strip This is from Paper Rose's Slimline strips. So they're actually a full slimline length, but you can use them for any of your cards. And I will have links provided in the description box for all of the products used in this video. For the image on the card, I used a stitch circle die and cut out the sweet little bird and all the little floral images, layered it on some red cardstock, and then I'll adhere it directly onto my card. For many of my cards, I am trying to keep them fairly flat. That way I know I won't have to pay anything additional for postage. Using another sentiment cut apart from the Crisp Christmas sentiment sheets, I have O Come All Ye Faithful. And in order to get that same angle, I put it at the very edge and just flipped over my card panel and then trimmed it. I'll add a couple little scrap pieces of cardstock to the very right side where it goes off of the circle die cuts. I like to hold the piece up to the card and feel and see if I need to add more layers or less layers. I like to keep it all at that same level. So I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it in place. And I'm trying to get it at the same angle as that stitched green strip. Then I decided to add a few small circles in the upper left-hand corner. And I was looking for a die that would work perfectly for that size. And I found the Cog set from Paper Rose. And one of those gears has all of these little circles that would be a leftover piece. So I used that and cut out all 3 of my little circles, and they're the perfect size. Just adhere those in place using some liquid adhesive. So there is my finished card, and I was able to make 2 using this sketch. I love the look of the plaid paper in the background. Such a fun collection. For card design number 8, I'm using a card sketch from Mojo Monday. This is number 548. Now at this point in the video, I think I only have 1 full sheet of the 6x6 paper. So lots of these thin strips. For the background, I decided to use some of the polka dots. So this is the Winter Dots and Stripes collection. And I have that beautiful floral paper, adhered it to the left. And then using some of the basics, I have that lovely pattern, layering everything on sort of a teal turquoise colored cardstock. I used some solid red cardstock for that thin strip that's on the lower portion of the card. Put my card front onto a card base. I'll add some liquid adhesive to the back of this tone-on-tone pattern paper piece. I'll use another of the cut aparts. This is Peace, Love, and Joy. I'll layer it on that same cardstock color and then adhere it to that tone-on-tone pattern piece. So I'm following this sketch fairly closely, although I won't add that little branch that comes out to the left of this sentiment. I'll put a small banner in the upper right-hand corner, just adhere it using some liquid adhesive. And I decided that lower right-hand corner needed a little something, so I cut out another beautiful snowflake, this time using some white shimmer cardstock. I love the contrast against that greenish teal pattern paper. Then using a few more of the crystals, I'll add 2 in the upper right-hand corner. I'll put 1 in the center of the snowflake and then a few in the lower left-hand corner. I love the color combination on this card, and here's a good example showing how you can mix and match several of those collections. So I have the winter blooms, I have some of the dots and stripes, and also the winter basics, and they all work beautifully together. I did make a total of 3 cards, and for each of the cards I use a different color polka dot background. So even using that same card design, having the different color background really changes the look of the card. And I think they all turned out beautifully. It's probably my favorite card design from the whole set, but do let me know which card is your favorite. For card design number 9, I'm using the white and red diagonal stripe paper for the background. The back side of this paper has all of those cut apart images, so I only had 1 sheet of this paper. I'm going to layer it on some red cardstock. Using the red and white polka dot paper, I cut out the sentiment Joy, and I also cut it out from some solid red cardstock. And this die set is called Big Joy. It's a new set by Paper Rose. So I'm layering those two pieces together. I have the red cardstock in the background and I'm offsetting that pattern paper just slightly. So you're gonna see just a peek of that red cardstock from behind, and it'll also add just a little bit of dimension. Once I have all of those layers adhered together, I'll be putting the sentiment at an angle on the background. I love the large size of the letters. I won't adhere them down yet. I'm bringing in some more of the cut aparts to decorate that sentiment. So I have several of the little branches and I'll be tucking them behind some of the letters, and the others it'll be in front. So just to add extra detail. So I'll start with the Y. I have one little branch tucked behind on the right, and I'll be adding the little bird and floral bouquet above the letter Y. For the O, I'm going to tuck one of the little branches inside and then add the tiny little branch on top. For the letter J, I'll have a little branch peeking out to the right and then one out of the top. And I did have to trim that piece down just a little bit. So I'll put liquid adhesive on the back of the J. Now I have all the sentiment in place. For the final cut apart image with the bird and the flowers, I am going to pop this up using some thin foam squares. And it's going to sit right on top of the letter Y. Put just a drop of adhesive where it'll touch the letter Y. Then I felt that that lower left-hand corner seemed a little empty, so I cut 2 strips of some pattern paper from the Basics collection. Used the green color. I'm just adhering them in that lower right-hand corner, layering the 2 pieces together. So there is my finished card. I was only able to make one since I don't have any more of that red and white striped paper. For card design number 10, this is the final full 6x6 sheet that I have left. It's a beautiful pattern with all these sweet little birds and the flowers and holly. I'm going to layer this on some dark teal cardstock. I really didn't want to cover up very many of the birds. I wanted them to shine on this paper. I'm adding a stitched oval die cut. I used one of the green patterns from the Winter Basics. Then I have this large floral cut apart piece. I'm going to pop it up using some thin foam squares. Since the background pattern paper is very busy and that floral image is pretty busy, I wanted to have that green tone-on-tone oval to separate those two, to break up that busyness. I'm using one of the Christmas sentiment cut aparts. This is Christmas Blessings. I'll add some thin foam squares to the back. I did put those foam squares more on the lower portion of that sentiment since I have it going on top of that oval. Then to finish off the card, I'll add just a few of the crystals, putting 2 of them to the right of the image and 1 to the left. I really didn't want to add a lot to this card since that paper is so busy, and I really didn't want to cover up all those sweet little birds. So there is my finished card. I was only able to make one, and at this point I don't have any more full 6x6 sheets of paper. So this is what I currently have left over, mostly long, about 2 or 1 inch strips. For my next set of cards, I'm using a sketch from OWH. This is number 170. This sketch is perfect if you just have those narrow strips left over. I'm using the green polka dot paper for the background, and that is from the Dots and Stripes collection. I have 2 of the pattern papers. I'm going to layer everything on some dark green cardstock. And then that smaller little rectangle on the sketch is perfect for the small cut aparts that are included in the paper collection. And several of those cut aparts don't have a sentiment. So really you could use this card for any card theme. It doesn't have to be Christmas or winter. Now since this card sketch doesn't have the measurements for the matted layers, I did adjust the measurements slightly so I could still fit those matted layers. And all of the layers that I'm currently showing are an additional 1/8 of an inch. Now for that cut apart, I did add a 1/4 of an inch just because there's that very busy design and I wanted it to stand out from those background pattern papers. For that 1/2 inch strip that goes across the card, I decided to use a dark teal cardstock. I didn't want to bring in any other pattern papers. Before adhering that cut apart, I will add those scrap pieces of cardstock where it's above and below that blue strip, just to keep it nice and level. And in the very lower right hand corner, I did add a thin foam square just so that corner wouldn't droop down. I'm also adding a small banner in the upper left hand corner using that same green cardstock. I'll just glue it in place using some liquid adhesive. And then for those 3 small dots, I'll use the second smallest size of the crystals. And it was easy to line up those crystals since I can just follow the line of polka dots. Sometimes when there's that pattern in the background, like stripes or polka dots, they aren't straight, and that drives me crazy. So I was really happy that the polka dots are nice and straight on this pattern paper. Now I could have just left a sentiment off and added it on the inside, but I decided to add the word peace using that crisp Christmas sentiment set. Just adhere it in place using some liquid adhesive. So there is my finished card, and I was able to make 3 using this sketch since I have quite a few of those about 2-inch strips left over. The other 2 have a red background, which I think is fun as well. Now moving on to card design number 12, and this is my final card design. I'm using the Card Creator 3 die set from Paper Rose. And this is the perfect die to finish off the last of those pattern paper scraps. I think it's also fun. I used this die for my very first Paper Rose video. I used their native floral collection, which is absolutely stunning. I do want to mention not all of those little rectangles are exactly the same size. So I do keep track while I'm cutting them out, and I generally cut them out one at a time. I just use some washi tape and tape that scrap piece of cardstock to the die and then run it through my die cut machine. And then I'll just lay out all the pieces on a piece of scrap paper. Now I am going to layer this piece on the same color cardstock just so it has that about 1/8 of an inch of that matted layer. I'll put my card front onto a card base. Now this is not an American Standard A2 size, so you can see it's a little narrower and just slightly shorter, but it still works. I just trimmed down my card base so that it would fit. For the sentiment, I'm using the Winter Wishes, and I've already glued those pieces together. I also pulled out a few more of the cut aparts. I don't have very many left at this point. Put some adhesive on the back, and I'm just tucking them behind underneath the word winter. Then I'll add some thin foam squares to the back to pop up this sentiment and the images. I'll adhere it to the lower right hand corner once I remove all the release paper. This die is so fun since you can combine 12 different pattern papers, or you could do solids in the background as well. I do tend to focus on pattern paper, so this was perfect for me. Then I'll finish off the card adding a few more of the clear crystals. I'll put 2 in the upper left hand corner, 2 in the lower right hand corner around that sentiment, and then 1 up to the left from that sentiment. And there is my finished card. I was able to make 2 using the leftover paper scraps. So after all of those cards, this is what I have left over. Just 3 small pattern paper pieces and then a few of the cut aparts. And I do have 2 of the larger cut aparts. So I'm going to set those aside and try to mix them in when I use the other 2 paper collections. Now here's a quick recap of the 23 cards I made using Paper Rose's Winter Blooms 6x6 paper collection. Now along with the Winter Blooms, I did use some of the coordinating collections, the Winter Plaid, the Winter Dots and Stripes, and also the Winter Basics. And I still have a lot of all 3 of those coordinating collections left over, so I'll be able to use them with the other 2 Christmas collections that Paper Rose just released. I do have links provided in the description box if you are interested in any of the products I used in this video. Paper Rose is located in Australia, and they do ship internationally, but you can also purchase their products here in the US. And I do have links to both locations in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.